It was the most savage wildfire to hit the forest in decades. Animals ran for miles to avoid the lapping, hungry tongues of flames that ate up trees and undergrowth. Fire teams were dispatched as soon as the alarm bells went off. Evacuation orders lit up across the state. And as is rather unusual for a forest fire, members of the SCP Foundation were dispatched to assess the situation too. After all, it's not exactly normal when a kilometer-high pillar of flame shoots up above the tree line, like the burning sword of some wrathful heavenly warrior. And it's really not normal for it to remain there, like a static column of blazing nothing for almost an hour. At best, they were looking at some kind of strange act of thaumaturgy gone wrong from an amateur pyromancer who'd picked the worst possible place to practice his risky trade. At worst, for all they knew, they could be the warning shot for some immensely powerful demonic being preparing to usher in an XK-class end-of-the-world scenario. And in the Foundation's line of work, you really don't gain much from picking the more optimistic option. The mobile task force moved into the forest with the firefighters, blending in among them with their heavy fireproof gear. The one difference, as the horrified fire crews soon noticed, was that the Foundation task force wasn't taking the fire on from the edges and trying to put it out. No, they were moving inwards, straight into the heart of the blaze, with seemingly no care for their own safety. It was partly because, unlike the firefighters, the task force operators knew that there were things out there far more dangerous than the fire itself. That was exactly what they were potentially here to tackle. But that didn't mean the fire wasn't dangerous either. They fought on through the blaze and hoped their oxygen tanks would hold. The glowing inferno and the embers in the air all around them kicked off tremendous heat, even in their enhanced thermal protection gear. The air around them was choked with smog, and in the belly of the blaze, their thermal visors did absolutely nothing to improve their visibility. The internal compass and the satellite instructions embedded on their heads-up display were the only things that would give them a sense of forward momentum. They trudged towards their goal on the blind faith that the commands from the eye in the sky weren't just marching them towards their gruesome deaths. They had faith, loyalty too. But in a situation this dangerous, it was hard to forget just how many D-classes the Foundation had sent to terrible fates by telling them that they'd just been taking part in a harmless test. If all this went wrong, the Foundation already had the alibis for all their deaths drafted. It was a paint-by-numbers, fill-in-blanks form that they used to inform grieving friends and relatives when an officer had fallen in the line of duty. Those deaths were already written for everyone at the Foundation. They just hadn't quite caught up with their own stories just yet. But still, they fought on, the firemen at the Inferno's edge miles behind them now. Soon, they would be out of the worst of the fire, into the hellish and blackened place that the flames had devoured and left a smoking wreck. The ends of once mighty trees, charred and wilted like the ends of used matchsticks. When they reached that place, the place where the fire had eaten its fill and left only the burnt bones of the forest, they feared that they were in even more danger, even amongst the smoke. They could see the flame pillar glowing up ahead, their waypoint. And then, it abruptly disappeared, and somehow that concerned them even more. Either the horrors were over, or they'd just begun. Still, the satellite pumped them the directions, and they kept on marching towards their destination, the cool air of the place behind the fire feeling freezing against the outside of their suits by comparison. Aside from the smoke, there was nothing obstructing the view. All the trees were little more than burnt stumps this far in. That's where they encountered the first human corpses. It was hard to tell who they once were, because the burns had taken them so deeply. Both were crouching, almost like they were praying, facing the same direction towards the fire's point of origin. Any clothes they'd been wearing were burnt to cinder. Their flesh was a wet, melted black, peeling and sloughing away to expose sooty bones and glistening half-cooked musculature underneath. Dental records, bone analysis, and DNA testing would later reveal that they'd been a man and a woman, a married couple from a town not far from the forest where the fire had broken out. The Foundation would be grateful for an easy cover story for once. As far as anyone would ever know, The duo had just been hiking in the wrong place at the wrong time. It wasn't until after that researchers would discover just how involved those two were in this particular case from the very beginning. A voice came in over comms for the MTF saying, "You're close to the coordinates of the fire inception point. Stay on guard. We still don't know what we're dealing with here." The team acknowledged and raised their weapons. Not assault rifles, submachine guns, or shotguns this time. The team ran the numbers and realized that in heat this bad, there'd been a serious risk of the rounds exploding in their weapons and causing injury. Instead, they were wielding what you might be able to call extreme fire extinguishers. Ultra heat-resistant carbon fiber, high-pressure dispensers that released a mix of liquid nitrogen and quick-hardening CO2 foam with Kevlar nanofibers. Someone would need to have unleashed a miniature sun on Earth for these weapons to be unmatched. "Up ahead," the team's pointman said. "Possible hostile. Stay frosty." Nobody laughed. They were instead all transfixed by the sight of the glowing, middle-aged Indian woman standing about 30 feet ahead of them, behind the corpse of a large stag. Her skin was coated in white ash like an aghori, the heat still shining through from her outer dermis. She was panting, exhausted, confused. Her frightened eyes darted between each of them, these menacing men in black tactical armor pointing weapons at her. She cleared her throat and asked in a trembling voice, "My friends, Rick and Mary, where are they?" In unison, they all thought back to the two incinerated corpses, locked in their eternal vindictive kneel, their flesh blown off by the sheer heat. And here was this woman, completely unharmed despite the fact that the fire would burn hottest exactly where she would have been standing. Clearly, they had their anomaly and just needed to get her back to the nearest Foundation containment site before she lit anything else on fire. When one of the mobile task force members stepped forward to give her a space blanket in order to protect her dignity, he accidentally nudged the hoof of the dead stag. Like a falling chain of dominoes, the stag collapsed in on itself into a pile of simmering gray ash with an accompanying shockwave of heat. The remains were full of twinkling red veins, like the last dying embers of a campfire. It was like it'd somehow been burned away from the inside, without any apparent damage being done to the exterior. Fire ate it from within, as if they even needed any more proof that what they were dealing with here was undeniably an anomalous phenomenon. The regular firefighters had done enough to contain the worst of the blaze, and helicopters began descending to dump water on the isolated patches still burning away. A Foundation Blackhawk with a special fireproof interior swooped in to collect the team and their new find. When she was brought back to the site, she was quickly designated SCP-273. Strangely, unlike a lot of other sentient humanoid anomalies, SCP-273 was surprisingly compliant with the news that she would now be contained, after being told that this containment would keep her away from the general human population. Wanting a greater insight into what exactly had happened here and what this strange new anomaly was capable of, Dr. Reed, the lead researcher on her case, conducted an interview. She began with, "You are saying then that I will be kept safe here? Away from people?" Dr. Reed nodded and smiled. "Yes, 273, that's correct." She smiled at this. "Thank you. And by the way, my name is Misha. You may use that instead." Dr. Reed shuffled his papers and began taking notes. "Noted. What was the first thing you remember from when you were younger?" A question so forward seemed to puzzle SCP-273. She paused for a long moment before sharply exhaling, "I woke up surrounded by flames and covered in ash. It was the first time, I think." "You remember nothing else from before that?" "How long ago was this? How old were you?" Dr. Reed asked. This, for the first time, seemed to put SCP-273 on the defensive. "Is it not proper to ask only one question at a time?" "Answer the questions, please." I don't. It was a very long time ago." Dr. Reed wasn't going to be dissuaded by her evasiveness. "And how old were you?" SCP-273 seemed to pause for thought. 37 years, that much I remember. And I think I have made some great mistakes. Perhaps that's why I am what I am now." "And what are you now?" With absolute, unshakable confidence, she replied, "A demon. and in some ways she wasn't entirely unfounded to believe that. Upon further pressing, she revealed that she'd been aware, upon searching her memories, that she'd accidentally killed her two friends, Rick and Mary. She said that the two of them were friendly, but the utterly devout Christian couple who'd taken great interest in her after finding out about her strange secret, they were the only ones who told her that she must have been a demoniac, someone possessed by a demonic force and afflicted with its terrible curse. Perhaps, through faith, they could exorcise it. That was the pretense under which they led her out into the forest, to perform a kind of holy ritual in nature, the true palace of God, that would chase the demon from her body. Of course, she'd had reservations about the whole thing, despite their pure intentions. Sadly for them and everything else caught in that fire, SCP-273 said that her hunger had simply gotten too great, and the fire started shortly after that. Naturally, the Foundation began researching this little tidbit in further detail. It turned out this hunger wasn't so much a craving for food or anything that we think of as sustenance. While SCP-273 could enjoy the taste of food and drink, she actually didn't need it to survive. However, the fire within her was another story. A few expensive containment chamber destroying accidents taught them that in order for things to go smoothly, they would need to provide 273 with 2.5 kilograms of raw meat approximately every 12 hours. SCP-273 would make no attempt to eat or even touch the meat, in the sense that we think of eating or touching. Instead, through means that appeared to be entirely involuntary, the meat would begin to burn. Not a roaring external blaze like the forest fire, but instead an internal burn, much like the one experienced by the stag that the mobile task force found next to 273 in the forest. It's only through the burning of meat like this that the explosive power of SCP-273 seems to be kept under any kind of control, and has led some credence as to why she wanted to be kept away from the rest of humanity. What SCP-273 has is no superpower. It can affect anything around her at any time, often much to her distress, leaving her in a fireproof chamber with the only other thing being meat for her to metabolize with flame is truly the safest option. However, despite her dangerous curse, SCP-273 herself seems relatively well adjusted. Aside from certain amnesiac tendencies and gaps in her memory that researchers speculated might have been some kind of repressed trauma, she was always friendly and amiable with researchers and guards, which earned her a good reputation around the halls of the containment site. Oftentimes, researchers who weren't even assigned to the SCP-273 case would drop by her containment cell just to strike up a conversation with her. And as is often the case with Foundation containment, the more the staff got used to her presence, the more time passed without an escape attempt or an incident that caused any kind of harm, the more they let their guard down around her. The more certain standards of containment started to slip. And on a day that happened to be her 45th birthday, as best as the researchers could gather, one of the agents decided to get her a gift that had horrific consequences. Agent Myers was a good man who was sadly deeply connected to the incident that took his life. Seeing that she never ate or drank, and the only thing that was ever taken into her cell were platters of raw meat, he figured she deserved a special treat on her birthday. It's why he bought her a bottle of Bacardi to enjoy. However, when he brought it into her cell, the flaming hunger within her seemed to latch onto it. But the internal flame started a chemical reaction that ignited the bottle and caused a huge explosion inside her cell. An explosion that killed Agent Myers and SCP-273. So why is this particular anomaly marked Euclid and not neutralized? That's because SCP-273 came back. It was actually by this pure accident that the Foundation discovered the true extent of SCP-273's abilities. When she died, her body set alight, creating a giant pillar of unstoppable flame, just like the one observed in the forest when she first was contained. When the pillar was gone, all that was left was a pile of ash. But from that ash, by degrading any matter around it over the course of several hours, SCP-273 can rebuild herself, exactly as she was before, so that her cursed life may continue. It's why they call her the Human Phoenix. Want more anomalies that like it hot, hot, hot? Go check out SCP-457 Burning Man or SCP-1179 Centralian Fire Demon for more.